Hello and welcome back to another evening of shared stories. Tonight we're doing something a little different. We're diving deep into the world of The Walking Dead, but we're not covering the whole thing from start to finish. No, tonight we're going to talk about the moments that haunt you, the episodes that made you pause the screen and sit there for a second, wondering if they really just showed that on television. The disturbing ones, the ones that stuck with you long after the credits rolled and the lights came back on. Now, I want to be upfront. We're going to go through some genuinely dark storytelling tonight, but I'm not here to shock you or keep you awake with jump scares. Think of this more like sitting around a campfire, talking through the stories that left a mark. Some of these are sad, some are brutal. Some are the kind of thing where the horror comes not from walkers, but from people. And honestly, that's what The Walking Dead always did best. It used the dead to show us what the living are capable of. We've got plenty to cover tonight, so if you enjoy this kind of thing and want a way to support the channel, subscribing down below goes a long way. But for now, settle in, get comfortable, close your eyes if you want to, and let's begin. So to really understand why the disturbing moments in this show hit so hard, you have to go back to the very beginning. Season 1, Episode 1. Days Gone By. The year was 2010, and this was the episode that told the world exactly what kind of show The Walking Dead was going to be. It was directed by Frank Darabont, the same man behind The Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile, and you can feel that cinematic weight in every frame. It opens with Rick Grimes, a sheriff's deputy in a small Georgia town, pulling up to a gas station in his patrol car. The world looks normal, or close to it. Abandoned cars, sure, some debris, but it's quiet. He walks through the gas station looking for fuel, and then he hears something. Small footsteps. He crouches down and sees a pair of little feet in bunny slippers shuffling across the ground behind a row of cars. A child. Rick calls out to her. She turns around, and that's when we see her face. Grey skin, dead eyes, blood around her mouth. She's holding a stuffed animal. She growls and starts walking toward him. Rick raises his revolver, hesitates for just a moment, and then fires. That opening scene told you everything. This show was not going to protect you from what was coming. Not even kids were off limits, and that set the tone for 11 seasons of storytelling that would push boundaries again and again. After the cold open, we flash back to before the world ended. Rick is shot in the line of duty during a standoff with criminals. He goes into a coma, and when he wakes up, the world has already fallen apart. The hospital is abandoned. There are dried bloodstains on the walls, bullet holes in the corridor, and the fluorescent lights are dead. He stumbles through the hallways in his hospital gown, confused, dehydrated, barely able to stand. He pushes through a set of heavy doors and finds himself in a stairwell that reeks of rotting flesh, lighting matches as he goes because the power is completely gone. When he finally gets outside, the sunlight hits him and he sees hundreds of decayed bodies, wrapped in sheets, arranged in rows and piles on the hospital loading bay. Flies everywhere, military equipment abandoned, a helicopter sitting there, with no pilot, no crew, nobody. The army came, the army tried. The army failed. Rick stumbles up a hill and spots an overturned bicycle in a park. As he reaches for it, a mutilated woman lying on the ground turns toward him. She's missing her legs. Her lips are gone. She reaches for him, moaning and growling, trying to drag herself across the grass. This is the Bicycle Girl, and she's one of the most iconic images in the entire series. Rick falls off the bike in shock, then gets himself together and rides away. What makes this opening so effective is how alone Rick is. There's no exposition dump, no news broadcast explaining what happened. Just a man waking up to the end of the world and having to figure it out step by step. The hospital hallway, the body bags, the Bicycle Girl. Each one is a piece of a nightmare he's assembling in real time. He makes his way home. The front door is open. The house is empty. His wife Laurie and his son Carl are gone. He sits on his front steps sobbing, calling their names, not knowing if they're alive or dead. and that's when he sees a figure stumbling down the street. Rick waves to get his attention, not realizing it's a walker. A young boy named Dwayne creeps up behind Rick and hits him with a shovel. Dwayne's father, Morgan Jones, approaches the stumbling walker and shoots it in the head. He then walks over to Rick, points a revolver in his face, and demands to know about his bandage. Rick passes out before he can answer. Later that night, Rick wakes up tied to a bed. Morgan explains the new reality. During Rick's coma, the dead started coming back. They bite, they kill, they turn you into one of them. The fever burns you out. You die. Then you come back. Morgan tells him all of this calmly, like a man who has had to accept the unacceptable. His son Dwayne sits nearby, holding a baseball bat, watching Rick with cautious eyes. But here's the part that really gets under your skin. Morgan's wife, Jenny, is out there. She died, she turned, and every night she walks up to the front door of the house Morgan and Dwayne are hiding in. She turns the doorknob, not violently, not like the other walkers who just claw and pound. She turns it gently, like she remembers, like somewhere deep inside whatever's left of her. She knows this is where her family is. Morgan can see her from the upstairs window. He sets up a rifle. He looks through the scope. Jenny is down there on the street, wandering among the other walkers. He puts the crosshairs on her face. His finger is on the trigger, and he can't do it. He's sobbing, shaking, telling himself to pull the trigger, and he just cannot kill the woman he loved. Dwayne is downstairs, and Morgan is alone with the scope and the weight of what he can't bring himself to do. That scene is quiet. There's no action sequence. No one is in immediate danger. But it's one of the most devastating moments in the entire first season, because it introduces a theme the show will come back to over and over again. The things we can't do, the mercy we show or don't show, the moment we hesitate, those decisions have consequences. And Morgan's hesitation here, his inability to put Jenny down, that specific failure will come back to destroy him in ways we won't fully understand until much later in the series. We'll get to that, I promise. Rick eventually makes his way to Atlanta, riding a horse into the city in one of the most visually stunning shots the show ever produced. The streets are empty, the buildings are quiet, and then he turns a corner and finds himself face to face with hundreds, maybe thousands, of walkers filling the streets, like a slow-moving flood. The horse panics, Rick is thrown. He crawls under a tank to escape, and that's essentially the end of the first episode. A man alone in a dead city, trapped under a tank, surrounded by the dead. The reason I'm spending so much time on this pilot is that it establishes the contract between the show and the audience. The Walking Dead was telling you from minute one that it would not look away. It would show you the ugly parts, the body bags, the rotting woman in the park, the child walker in the gas station, the husband who can't shoot his dead wife. This wasn't going to be a show where everything works out and the heroes always win. This was going to be a show about what happens to people when the rules disappear and survival is the only thing left. And that contract, that willingness to go to dark and honest places, is exactly what made the disturbing episodes we're about to discuss so powerful. Because by the time the show got to the really haunting stuff, you already knew they meant it. You already knew they wouldn't pull their punches. You already knew that nobody was safe. Speaking of nobody being safe, let's talk about the prison. Because what happened inside those walls in Season 3 is still, to this day, one of the most emotionally devastating sequences the show ever put together. And it all started with a man named Andrew and a grudge that nobody saw coming. By the start of Season 3, Rick's group had been on the road for months. The farm was gone, overrun at the end of Season 2. They'd been moving from place to place, clearing houses, sleeping in shifts, barely eating. Laurie was visibly pregnant and getting further along every day. The group was exhausted, desperate, and running out of options. Then they found the prison, a large correctional facility somewhere in rural Georgia, surrounded by double fences topped with razor wire. Walkers filled the yard and the corridors, but Rick saw what it could be. Walls, fences, guard towers. A place they could actually defend. A place where Laurie could have the baby. A place that might, for once, feel something like home. They took the outer yard first. Rick ran across the open ground to seal the far gate, while the others provided cover fire from the fence line and the guard towers. Daryl and Carol shot from above. Glenn and Maggie drew walkers to the fence so they could be stabbed through the chain link. It was coordinated, efficient, and genuinely impressive. These people had become survivors in the truest sense. That night, they sat around a fire in the yard, and for just a moment, things felt okay. Beth and Maggie sang an old Irish song, while Herschel smiled. Daryl and Carol talked quietly by the fence. Rick looked over his group, and you could see him thinking, maybe, just maybe, this could work. The next day they pushed deeper inside. They cleared cell block C, taking out walkers in riot gear, which was a nasty surprise since stabbing a walker through a riot helmet isn't exactly straightforward. Maggie figured out you could get a blade up under the face shield, and they made quick work of the rest. They set up in the cells, started making it livable. Carl even picked out his own cell, trying to act grown up about it. But the prison wasn't empty. There were 5 inmates who'd been locked in the cafeteria since the early days of the outbreak. They'd been surviving on the kitchen's food supply for nearly a year, completely unaware of what the world had become outside those walls. The leader of the group was a man named Thomas, and from the very first moment you saw him, you could tell he was going to be a problem. Rick made a deal. He'd help the prisoners clear out their own cell block in exchange for half their food. Simple enough. But during the clearing operation, Thomas deliberately shoved a walker directly into Rick. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't panic. It was a calculated attempt to get Rick killed without making it look intentional. Rick saw it for exactly what it was. Without hesitation, without a speech or a warning, Rick buried a machete in the top of Thomas's skull. One swing. Done. Another prisoner, Andrew, ran. Rick chased him into a courtyard full of walkers and locked the door behind him, leaving him to die. Except Andrew didn't die. He found another way out. And he waited. This is important to understand because everything that happens next, all the horror and heartbreak of Season 3, Episode 4, Killer Within, traces directly back to this moment. Andrew survived, and he came back for revenge. Several days later, while the group is going about their morning routines, things start to go wrong. The prison's backup generators suddenly kick on, triggering alarms throughout the facility. The noise is deafening, and it's doing exactly what you'd expect. It's attracting every walker within earshot straight to the prison. At the same time, walkers start flooding the courtyard. Someone has cut the fence open. Someone has lured them in with a deer carcass spread across the yard. Someone has deliberately sabotaged the prison from the inside. It's Andrew, and his timing is devastating. The group scatters. Glenn and Daryl race to shut down the generators. Rick, Oscar and Daryl split up to find the source of the breach. Herschel and Beth lock themselves behind a fenced-in walkway, and Laurie, Carl and Maggie flee into the prison corridors, trying to get back to the safety of the cell block. But Laurie doesn't make it. The stress of running, the chaos, the fear, it triggers her labour right there in the prison hallways. Carl leads them into the boiler room, a concrete space with pipes and machinery, and absolutely nothing that resembles a delivery room. Maggie helps Laurie down. The contractions are coming fast, and then Laurie starts hemorrhaging. She knows what's happening. She's been through childbirth before. She knows that something has gone wrong, and that she is not going to survive this. She tells Maggie to cut her open, a cesarean section, right there on the floor of a prison boiler room. No anesthesia, no surgical tools, just Maggie's knife. Before Maggie starts, Laurie turns to Carl, her son, 12, maybe 13 years old, standing in a boiler room watching his mother bleed on the floor. And Laurie says goodbye. She tells him he's smart. She tells him he's strong. She tells him he's going to beat this world. "You are the best thing I ever did," she says, and she means it. every word. You can hear in her voice that she's made peace with dying, as long as her children survive. Maggie slices Laurie's abdomen open. She reaches inside and pulls the baby out. The baby is alive, crying, breathing, a girl, but Laurie is motionless on the floor, blood pooling beneath her. She's gone. Maggie starts to leave with the baby, but Carl stops her. "We can't just leave her here, she'll turn." He's right. In this world, everyone who dies comes back unless the brain is destroyed. Maggie tells him he doesn't have to do this, but Carl insists. He is going to be the one. His mother is not going to come back as one of those things. Not if he can prevent it. Maggie walks toward the exit. Behind her, a single gunshot echoes through the boiler room. Carl walks past her a moment later, his face completely blank. No tears, no expression. Just a boy who has just shot his mother in the head to stop her from becoming a monster. Walking through a prison corridor with blood on his boots and nothing left behind his eyes. When Rick finds out, he doesn't hear about it in a quiet conversation. He sees Maggie emerge from the prison, carrying a newborn baby, crying. He sees Carl walking behind her, hollow. He sees the blood, and there's no Laurie. Rick's face changes. He drops the axe he's been carrying. He makes this sound, this guttural noise, that doesn't sound like grief or anger or anything you can name. Andrew Lincoln, the actor, delivered a performance in that moment that is still talked about as one of the greatest single scenes in television drama. He collapses, he can't stand, he can't speak, he just breaks. Later, Rick goes back into the boiler room. He finds the spot where Laurie died. The knife is on the floor. Birth fluids, blood, but her body is gone. He follows a blood trail across the room until he finds a walker, bloated and gorged, sitting against the wall in a stupor. It has consumed Laurie's entire body, every part of her. Rick stares at it. He pulls out his revolver and shoots it in the mouth. Then he takes out a knife and starts stabbing the walker's swollen belly, over and over, crying, screaming, lost in a grief so total that it borders on madness. And this is where Rick begins to unravel. In the episodes that follow, he starts hearing a telephone ringing in the prison. He picks it up. There are voices on the other end. People from a safe community, they say. He talks to them for days. Eventually, it's revealed that the voices are all people who have died. Amy, Jim, Jackie, and finally, Laurie. He's been talking to the dead, hallucinating. He sees Laurie standing in the prison yard, walking among the graves, watching him from doorways. She's not there. She's never there, but he sees her everywhere. This stretch of the show, from Killer Within through the rest of Season 3, is where The Walking Dead proved it could do more than zombie action. It could do psychological devastation. It could show you what grief looks like when there's no time to grieve, when the world won't stop falling apart long enough for you to even bury someone properly. Rick didn't get a funeral. He didn't get closure. He got a bloated walker with his wife inside it and a phone that wouldn't stop ringing. T-Dog's death in the same episode often gets overlooked because of Laurie's, but it deserves mention. When T-Dog was bitten on the shoulder during the initial chaos, he knew immediately that he was finished, but instead of giving up, he used his last minutes to save Carol. They were trapped in a corridor with 2 walkers blocking the way and no ammunition left. T-Dog charged the walkers, slamming them against the wall with his body, pinning them there so Carol could get through the doors behind him. The walkers started tearing into his neck and shoulders while he was still standing, still holding them back. Carol looked back and saw it happening. She screamed, but she kept going, because that's what he was buying her. Time. 2 major characters, gone in a single episode. A mother dead on a boiler room floor. A boy who had to put her down. A father who lost his mind. And all of it caused by one man's grudge and offence that nobody was watching closely enough. But as devastating as the prison arc was, the threat inside those walls was about to be eclipsed by something coming from outside. A man who kept severed heads in fish tanks, who hosted gladiator fights with chained walkers for entertainment, and who called himself the Governor. What he would do to one of the most beloved characters in the entire series is something fans have never forgiven, and honestly, I'm not sure they should. The Governor, real name Philip Blake, though he'd never tell you that willingly. When Andrea asked him his real name after they first met, he just smiled and said, "I never tell." He was played by David Morrissey, and I think part of what made the character so effective was how charming he could be. He wasn't some raving lunatic from the start. He was polite. He poured you a drink. He looked you in the eye and told you everything was going to be okay. And you believed him because he seemed like exactly the kind of leader you'd want in the apocalypse. Steady, capable, protective. The town he ran, Woodbury, looks like a slice of the old world dropped into the middle of the apocalypse. Clean streets, generators running, people walking around without weapons, drinking lemonade, having barbecues. It had walls, armed guards, and a leader who seemed to genuinely care about keeping everyone safe. Andrea and Michonne stumbled into Woodbury after spending months surviving on their own through a brutal winter, and you could understand why Andrea wanted to stay. It looked like paradise, but Michonne didn't trust it. From the very first day, something felt wrong to her, and Michonne's instincts, as we'd learn over and over throughout the series, were almost never wrong. The cracks started showing early. Michonne noticed the National Guard trucks the governor had brought back to town. He told the residents that the soldiers had been killed by walkers and that his people had simply recovered their supplies, their weapons, their medicine, a heroic salvage mission. Except Michonne spotted bullet holes in the vehicles, fresh blood on the seats, traces that didn't match a walker attack. They matched an ambush, and she was right. The governor had found a small unit of National Guard soldiers camped out on the road. He approached them with a white flag, acting friendly, acting relieved, and then his men opened fire from the tree line. They gunned down every soldier. Lieutenant Wells, who was in command, was killed along with all his people. The governor then looted their vehicles, took their weapons, and drove back to Woodbury with a story about finding everything abandoned. The town cheered, but the truth about who the governor really was didn't fully hit until you saw his private room. After everyone went to bed, after the lights dimmed in Woodbury and the streets went quiet, the governor would walk past his bedroom, past the woman sleeping in his bed, past a framed photograph of his wife and daughter, and into a separate room at the back of his apartment. Inside, he'd sit in a chair, pour himself a glass of whiskey, and stare at 3 rows of aquariums, fish tanks arranged on shelves like trophies, and inside each tank, floating in murky water, was a live walker head. They were alive. The heads were still animate, eyes moving, jaws snapping silently behind the glass, mouths opening and closing. Among them were the heads of Michonne's 2 pet walkers, the jawless, armless ones she'd been using as camouflage, and the freshly severed head of Lieutenant Wells. The governor sat there in the glow of those tanks, drinking whiskey and watching the heads like it was television. This was his evening routine. This was what relaxed him. And that wasn't even the worst of his secrets. His daughter Penny had turned. She was a walker, and instead of putting her down, the governor kept her locked in a room, chained up, with a bag over her head. He would sit with her, brush her hair, try to feed her. He believed, or wanted to believe, that she was still in there somewhere, that his little girl was still his little girl, even though she would have torn his throat out the second she got the chance. When Michonne eventually found Penny during a confrontation at the governor's apartment, she put a sword through the back of the girl's skull. To Michonne, she was killing a walker. To the governor, she had just murdered his daughter in front of him. He attacked Michonne with a ferocity that was almost animal. They fought through the apartment, smashing furniture, breaking glass, and Michonne ended up jamming a shard of one of the aquariums into the governor's right eye. He lost the eye, he lost Penny, and whatever thread of humanity had been keeping him even partially sane snapped clean off. What followed was one of the most unsettling transformations on the show. The governor didn't just become angry, he became methodical, cold. He told his people that the prison survivors were dangerous killers who had burned Woodbury and murdered his daughter. He fabricated a story to justify war. He organised an army. And when some of his own people, the regular citizens of Woodbury, refused to fight, he didn't argue with them. He didn't try to convince them. He pulled over the convoy on a country road, stepped out of his truck, and opened fire on his own people. Men, women, unarmed civilians who had trusted him, shot in the back as they tried to run. Martinez and Shumpert, two of his lieutenants, watched in horror but said nothing. Only one person survived. A woman named Karen, who hid under a corpse until the governor drove away. She later told Rick's group what had happened. An entire community wiped out by their own leader because they wouldn't follow him to war. But the governor wasn't done. After disappearing for a while, he reinvented himself, found a new group of survivors, earned their trust under a fake name, even found a new family to attach himself to, a woman named Lily and her daughter Megan. And then he led them all straight to the prison. Season 4, Episode 8, Too Far Gone. This is the one. The governor shows up at the prison gates with a tank, a small army, and 2 hostages, Michonne and Herschel. Herschel Green, the moral centre of the group. The man who had lost his farm, lost his wife, lost a leg to a walkabout that Rick amputated with a hatchet in a prison cafeteria, and still managed to be the most hopeful, most decent person in the room. He was the one who told Rick, "You can come back from this." He was the one who talked Rick down from his darkest moments. He was the father figure that almost every character on the show needed. The governor holds Michonne's katana, her own sword, to Herschel's neck. Rick stands at the prison fence pleading. He tells the governor they can share the prison. They don't have to fight. There's room for everyone. It's one of the most desperate, genuine speeches Rick gives in the entire series. And for a moment, you think it might work. Even Herschel thinks it might work. He looks up at Rick, and there's this small smile on his face. A nod. Like he's saying, "That's the man I knew you could be." The governor considers it for about 3 seconds. Then he says, "Liar!" and he swings. He doesn't take Herschel's head off cleanly. The katana isn't a guillotine. It cuts into the side of Herschel's neck, and Herschel falls to the ground, still alive. The governor hacks at him again, and again. Maggie and Beth, Herschel's daughters, are watching from behind the fence. They're screaming. Beth is wailing. The sound is terrible because it's not acted, not really. It sounds like real grief, the kind that comes from watching something you can't stop and can't undo. War erupts. The tank rolls through the prison fences. Walkers pour through the gaps. Gunfire everywhere. The governor's army and Rick's group tear each other apart across the prison yard. In the chaos, baby Judith's car seat is found empty and covered in blood. Nobody knows if she's alive. She is, it turns out, saved by Tyrese and the 2 girls, Lizzie and Mika. But in that moment, Rick and Carl think the baby is dead. Rick is already bleeding from a gunfight with the governor. Carl is shooting at people 3 times his age, and they have to run. The prison, their home, the one place they thought they could hold, is gone. The governor meets his end shortly after. Lily, the woman who trusted him, the woman he said he loved, shoots him after finding her daughter Megan killed by a walker. Rick had beaten the governor half to death in a fistfight, but it was Lily who finished it. A bullet to the head. No grand speech, no dramatic last words, just a gunshot and a body on the ground. Herschel's death is still one of the most mourned in the entire franchise, and I think the reason it hurts so much is that he represented something the show rarely allowed its characters to be. He was good. Not tough, not ruthless, not pragmatic. Good. And the show killed him in the most violent way possible, in front of his daughters, at the hands of a man who didn't even hesitate. It was the show telling you that goodness, real goodness, is not armor. It will not save you. And in a world like this, it might actually be what gets you killed. With the prison destroyed and the group scattered across the Georgia countryside, everyone was on their own. Daryl was with Beth. Glenn was alone. Maggie, Bob, and Sasha stuck together. And Tyrese ended up with Carol, baby Judith, and 2 sisters named Lizzie and Mika. They were walking the railroad tracks, following signs for a place called Terminus that promised sanctuary. But what happened in a quiet pecan grove along the way would produce what many fans and critics still call the single most disturbing episode The Walking Dead ever aired. Season 4, Episode 14, The Grove, written by Scott M. Gimple and directed by Michael E. Satrazemis. If you've seen it, you already know why I'm leading with the title. If you haven't, what I'm about to describe is going to sound like it can't possibly be from a television show that aired on basic cable, but it did, and it remains, in my opinion, and in the opinion of a lot of critics and fans, the most psychologically disturbing episode in the entire Walking Dead franchise. To understand The Grove, you have to understand the two girls at the centre of it. Lizzie and Micah Samuels. Their father, Ryan, died at the prison during the flu outbreak that swept through the community in early Season 4. Before he died, he asked Carol to look after his daughters, to take care of them as if they were her own. Carol agreed, and she tried. She really tried. But there was something wrong with Lizzie. It had been building since the prison. See, while most of the kids at the prison were learning to fear walkers, learning how to defend themselves, Lizzie was developing a completely different relationship with the dead. She named them. She fed them. At night, someone had been sneaking rats to the walkers at the fence, pressing the rodents through the chain link so the walkers could feed. It turned out to be Lizzie. She didn't see walkers as threats. She saw them as something misunderstood, something different, something that was just trying to change. Her sister Micah was the opposite. Micah understood what walkers were. She could kill them when she needed to. But Micah had her own problem. She couldn't kill people. She couldn't hurt another living person, no matter what. "I can kill walkers, but I can't kill people," she told Carol. "It's wrong." Carol warned her that this gentleness would get her killed. But Micah was resolute. She had a moral line, and she would not cross it. So you have two sisters, one who won't kill walkers because she thinks they're still people, and one who won't kill people because she knows it's wrong. Neither of them is equipped for this world, but for completely opposite reasons. Carol saw this, she knew it, and she was terrified of what it meant. After the prison fell, Carol, Tyrese, Lizzie, Micah, and baby Judith ended up together on the railroad tracks, following signs for Terminus. The journey was slow and tense. There were warning signs everywhere, if you knew where to look. One night, while the group was resting in a clearing, Lizzie was sitting on a log near two baby bunnies that had hopped out of the brush. She quietly pulled out her knife and killed both of them. Not in anger, not out of necessity, almost experimentally, like she was testing something. Nobody saw her do it, except the audience. The next day, while Tyrese was changing Judith's diaper, the group heard screaming in the distance. Tyrese told the girls to stay put and went to investigate. He found a walker attack on the railroad tracks, two men being torn apart. He fought to help, but couldn't save them. While he was gone, walkers started approaching the girls. Micah shouted to get Lizzie's attention, but Lizzie was focused on something else. She was staring at Judith, intensely, pressing her hand against Judith's nose and mouth to keep her quiet. Not to protect her, to suffocate her. She was so calm about it, so deliberate. She was going to let the baby die, or kill her outright, because in Lizzie's mind, dying wasn't the end. It was a transformation, and she wanted Judith to transform. Carol arrived just in time, pulling Lizzie away from Judith. The immediate crisis passed, but the seed was planted. They found the pecan grove, a small house surrounded by trees, set back from the railroad tracks, a well with clean water, pecans growing in the yard. For a moment, genuinely, it felt like they might have found somewhere safe. Tyrese sat by the fireplace that night and said he felt content. Micah suggested they make it their permanent home. Carol was cautious, but warming to the idea. It was peaceful. It was quiet. It felt like the world had paused. The next day, Carol saw Lizzie in the yard, playing with a walker. Not running from it, not fighting it, playing with it, chasing it around like a game of tag. She had named it Griselda. Carol ran outside and killed the walker with a knife. Lizzie screamed. "She was my friend, and you killed her?" She was hysterical with grief, mourning a dead thing like it was a pet, like Carol had just put down her dog in front of her. Carol tried a different approach. She took Lizzie out hunting and talked to her gently. She tried to explain. Meanwhile, Mika caught Lizzie feeding a mouse to a walker that was stuck on the railroad tracks nearby. Lizzie reached toward the walker's snapping jaws, inches from being bitten. Mika pulled her back. "They just want me to change," Lizzie said, "to make me be like them." More walkers emerged from the woods. All 4 of them formed a line and shot the walkers down. Lizzie participated this time. She pulled the trigger. Afterward, Carol asked if she understood now. Lizzie said yes. "I know what I have to do now," she replied. Carol believed her. Carol thought she'd finally gotten through. She hadn't. The next day, Carol and Tyrese went hunting in the woods together. They talked about the future. Maybe they could stay at the Grove permanently. Tyrese admitted he was still haunted by nightmares about Karen, his girlfriend who had been killed at the prison. Someone had dragged her body outside and burned it to stop the spread of the flu. He didn't know who. Carol knew. Carol was the one who had done it, but she couldn't tell him. Not yet. They walked back to the house, and they stopped, because Lizzie was standing in the yard next to Mika's body. Mika was on the ground, dead, stabbed. There was a bloody knife in Lizzie's hand. Baby Judith was lying on a blanket a few feet away, still alive, for now. "Don't worry, she'll come back," Lizzie said, looking at Carol and Tyrese with genuine excitement. "I didn't hurt her brain." She was smiling. She was happy. She genuinely believed she'd done something good. She had proven her point. Mika would come back as a walker, and then everyone would see that walkers were just different. Not dead, not gone, just changed. And she had been about to do the same thing to Judith. When Carol and Tyrese tried to approach, Lizzie pulled out a gun, a small pistol. She pointed it at them. Not aggressively, not like a threat, but defensively. She didn't want them to interfere. She didn't want them to stop Mika from coming back. Carol had to talk her down. Slowly, carefully, she coaxed the gun away from Lizzie and convinced her to go inside with Tyrese, while Carol stayed with Mika's body. Alone in the yard, Carol knelt beside Mika, sobbing. Then she pulled out her knife and stabbed Mika in the head to prevent reanimation. She dug the blade into the skull of a child she had promised to protect. That night, Carol and Tyrese talked. There was only one option, and they both knew it, even though neither of them wanted to say it out loud. Lizzie couldn't be around other people. She would do this again. She had already tried to suffocate Judith. She had killed her own sister. She didn't understand that what she had done was wrong. She genuinely believed it was right, and there was no way to make her understand. Not out here, not in this world, not ever. Carol took Lizzie for a walk the next morning. They went out into the field behind the house. Lizzie could sense something was off. "Please don't be mad at me," she said, crying. "I didn't mean to point the gun at you." She thought Carol was upset about the gun. She had no idea what was actually happening. Carol told Lizzie to look at the flowers. It was something Mika used to say to calm Lizzie down when she was upset. "Just look at the flowers and count to 3. Lizzie turned toward the wildflowers in the field. Carol stood behind her. She pulled back the hammer on her revolver. She held it for a moment, and then she pulled the trigger. They dug 2 small graves in front of the house, 2 mounds of earth side by side. That night, Carol gave Tyrese her gun and confessed. She told him she was the one who killed Karen and David at the prison. She told him to do whatever he needed to do. Tyrese gripped the edge of the table so hard, his knuckles went white. He was shaking. And then he said, "I forgive you, but I'm never going to forget. It's a part of you now. Me too." The next morning, they left the grove with Judith and continued down the railroad tracks in silence. This episode is, I think, the bravest thing The Walking Dead ever did. It didn't rely on walkers for its horror. It didn't need a villain or an action sequence. The horror came from a child who was broken in a way that couldn't be fixed, and from the adults who had to make an impossible choice because there was no institution, no hospital, No authority left in the world that could help. Carol had to kill a child to protect other children. And the show didn't cut away. It didn't soften it. It let you sit with the weight of it. The look at the flowers scene has become one of the most referenced moments in the entire franchise. And it's telling that the moment people remember isn't a zombie attack or a gunfight. It's a woman standing in a field with a gun, telling a little girl to look at the wildflowers. That's the image that stuck. That's the one people can't forget. And somehow, impossibly, the show had even darker places to go. Because at the end of those railroad tracks, there was a place called Terminus. The sign said, "Sanctuary for all." They promised safety, community, a fresh start. What they actually promised was a trough, a baseball bat, and a drain for collecting blood. The sign started appearing on the railroad tracks somewhere in the Georgia countryside. Hand-painted on plywood, simple, direct. Sanctuary for all, community for all. Those who arrive, survive. And then a map pointing toward a place called Terminus. After the prison fell, every scattered group of survivors found these signs. Glenn saw one and immediately started running. Maggie left messages on them for Glenn, smearing them with Walker blood so he'd know she was alive. Abraham, Eugene, and Rosita followed them. Bob, Sasha, and Maggie followed them. Everyone was converging on this one point on the map, because in a world where everything had been taken from them, the promise of a safe place was irresistible. When they arrived, Terminus looked legitimate. It was a large compound built around an old railroad depot. There were gardens, outdoor grills with meat cooking on them. A woman named Mary greeted new arrivals with a warm smile and offered them a plate of food. "Let's get you settled and we'll make you a plate," she said. It felt organised, welcoming, real. Rick, Carl, Michonne, and Daryl arrived last. Rick was already suspicious. He'd buried weapons in the woods outside just in case. And when they walked into the compound and sat down to talk with the residents, Rick noticed something. One of the Terminus men was wearing a riot gear vest from the prison. Another had a poncho that belonged to one of their people. Someone was wearing Herschel's pocket watch, the one Herschel had given to Glenn. Rick grabbed the nearest Terminus resident and held a gun to his head. "Where did you get this watch?" All hell broke loose. Gunfire erupted, but the bullets weren't aimed to kill. They were aimed at the ground, at the survivors' feet, herding them like cattle. Through corridors, past a room filled with candles and writing on the walls that said, "Never again," and "We first, always." Past another room where the floors were covered in personal belongings. Backpacks, stuffed animals, wristwatches, children's shoes, hundreds of them. The belongings of hundreds of people who had come to Terminus and never left. Rick's group was herded into a train car. Inside, they found Glenn, Maggie, Abraham, and the others, already trapped. The door slammed shut, and Rick, bruised and bleeding, looked at his people and said, "They're going to feel pretty stupid when they find out they're screwing with the wrong people." End of Season 4. Season 5 picks up exactly where Season 4 left off. No sanctuary? This episode aired on October 12th, 2014, and it pulled in 17.29 million viewers, which at the time broke the record for the most watched non-sports cable broadcast in television history. It was written by showrunner Scott M. Gimple and directed by Greg Nicotero, the show's legendary special effects and makeup supervisor. And it earned every single one of those viewers with what might be the most viscerally horrifying opening sequence the show ever produced. Rick, Glenn, Daryl and Bob are pulled from the train car. Their hands are bound with zip ties. They're gagged. They're forced to kneel at a long metal trough, like the kind you'd see in an industrial slaughterhouse. Next to them, 4 other prisoners are kneeling at the same trough. Nobody speaks. The only sounds are the muffled whimpers behind the gags and the quiet, businesslike movements of 2 Terminus butchers standing behind the trough. The first butcher picks up a metal baseball bat. The second holds a knife. They start at the far end of the trough, away from Rick's group. The bat comes down on the back of the first prisoner's head, with a crack that echoes through the room. The man slumps forward. The second butcher steps in and slits his throat over the trough. Blood pours into the metal channel. They move to the next prisoner. Bat, knife, trough, next. Bat, knife, trough. They're getting closer to Glenn. You can see Glenn watching, unable to look away, his eyes wide above the gag. He's next. The bat is raised. And then Gareth walks in. Gareth is the leader of Terminus, and the thing that makes him so disturbing is how normal he acts. He walks into a room where people are being systematically slaughtered, and he's holding a clipboard. He asks one of the butchers about his shot count. He checks something off on his paperwork. Now, he's not agitated. He's not angry. He's running a process. This is Tuesday for him. This is just another batch. He kneels down in front of Rick, removes his gag, and asks about the bag of weapons Rick hid in the woods. Rick tells him exactly what's in the bag, including a machete with a red handle. "That's what I'm going to use to kill you," Rick says, looking Gareth dead in the eye. Gareth puts the gag back on and tells the butchers to continue. The bat goes up over Glenn's head again. A massive explosion rocks the building. The walls shake, debris falls, the butchers stumble, and we cut outside to see what caused it. Carol. Carol, who had been banished from Rick's group by Rick himself back in Season 4. Carol, who had survived on her own. Carol, who had arrived at Terminus with Tyrese and baby Judith, and immediately knew something was wrong. She covered herself in walker guts for camouflage, took a rifle, and approached the compound from the outside. She saw a propane tank near the fence. She shot it. The explosion blew a hole in the wall, and walkers poured into Terminus like water through a broken dam. Inside the slaughterhouse, the explosion gives Rick the opening he needs. He frees himself from the zip ties, kills the butchers, and starts cutting the others loose. They arm themselves with whatever they can find and fight their way out, through corridors that are now filling with walkers and panicking Terminus residents. Rick is operating on pure survival instinct. He's not just escaping, he's killing everyone he can. Walkers, Terminus butchers, it doesn't matter. He's in a place where people were murdered and eaten on a schedule, and he is done showing mercy. Meanwhile, Carol makes her way through the compound and finds a room with the candles and the writing on the walls. Mary, the woman who had greeted visitors with that warm smile, is there. She pulls a gun on Carol. They fight. And Mary, in her last moments, tries to explain. She tells Carol that Terminus was real once. It was a genuine sanctuary. They put up the signs in good faith. They welcomed people. And then a group of men came. Invaders. They took over Terminus. They imprisoned the residents. They raped the women. They killed people for sport. And they did this for weeks. Eventually, Gareth and his people fought back. They killed the invaders. They took Terminus back. But they had been changed by what happened to them. They decided they would never be victims again. "You're either the butcher or the cattle," Mary said. That was the lesson they learned, and they applied it to every person who walked through their gates from that point forward. Every visitor was a resource: food, supplies, meat. Carol didn't need to hear the justification. She opened a door and let the walkers in to finish Mary off. The episode ends with one of the most emotionally satisfying moments in the entire series. Carol leads Tyrese and Judith to the edge of the woods, where Rick's group has regrouped. Daryl sees Carol first. He runs to her and wraps her in a hug so tight it looks like he's never going to let go. Rick, who had banished Carol, who had told her she couldn't come back, walks up to her with tears in his eyes and says, "Did you do that?" She nods. He hugs her. And then Sasha brings Judith forward. Rick sees his baby daughter, the one he thought was dead since the prison fell. He takes her in his arms, and for the first time in what feels like years, he cries tears that aren't grief. Carl runs over. The whole group gathers around. It's beautiful, and it's earned, because you just watched these people survive a literal slaughterhouse, and the fact that they're all standing here, alive, together, feels like a miracle, but Terminus wasn't quite finished with them. A few episodes later, the surviving members of the Terminus group, led by Gareth, tracked Rick's people to a church where they'd taken shelter. They captured Bob one night when he wandered outside alone. When Bob woke up, he was sitting by a campfire in the woods. His left leg was gone below the knee. Gareth was sitting across from him, eating a piece of meat on a stick. "If it makes you feel any better," Gareth said, almost conversationally, "you taste much better than we thought you would." Bob looked at them, and then he started laughing. Hysterical, uncontrollable laughter. Because Bob had been bitten by a walker earlier that day. He hadn't told anyone. He was already dying. "Tainted meat," he screamed at them. "You're eating tainted meat." The Terminus survivors panicked. Some of them started gagging. It didn't matter in the end. Whether the tainted meat was actually dangerous to them was never resolved, because Rick didn't give them time to find out. True to his word from the slaughterhouse, Rick hunted them down at the church, and he killed Gareth with the red-handled machete, just like he said he would. He didn't just kill him, he hacked him apart while Gareth begged for his life. Glenn and Maggie watched from the pews, horrified not by what was being done, but by how easily Rick was doing it. The Terminus arc, from the first signs on the railroad tracks to the final machete swing in the church, represents the Walking Dead at its most fearless. It took the zombie apocalypse premise and asked the ugliest possible question: what happens when people start eating each other? Not as monsters, not as walkers, but as a conscious, deliberate choice. The Terminus residents weren't insane. They were organised. They had a system. They kept records. They had convinced themselves that this was survival, that this was what the world required of them now, and that made it so much worse than any walker herd. With Terminus behind them, the group moved on, but the road ahead was long, and it wasn't finished with them. Before they reached Alexandria, before they found walls again, there was a stretch of episodes in the back half of Season 5 that are easy to overlook, but deeply unsettling in their own quiet way. The group was on the road, walking through the Virginia countryside, running out of food and water. They were exhausted, dehydrated, barely functioning. There's a scene where they're walking down a long stretch of highway, and Sasha is so hollowed out by grief, having lost both Bob and Tyrese in a short span, that she starts walking toward walkers and stabbing them with a reckless fury that wasn't about survival. It was about wanting to feel something, anything, even if that something was danger. Michonne had to pull her back. Sasha's response was basically, "So what?" The group was at its lowest point since the prison fell. Daryl was wandering off into the woods alone, eating whatever he could find, crying in private where no one could see him. He had just lost Beth, the person who had told him there was still good in the world, the person who had dragged him back from the edge of self-destruction during their time alone together after the prison. Her death at Grady Memorial had wrecked him. He wouldn't talk to anyone about it. He just disappeared into the trees and came back with red eyes, pretending he was fine. Then they found Alexandria, a walled community in northern Virginia, complete with houses, running water, electricity from solar panels, and people who had been living in relative comfort since the beginning of the outbreak. The Alexandrians had never been out there. Not really. They'd built their walls early and stayed behind them while the rest of the world fell apart. They were soft. They were naive. They were everything Rick's group used to be before the road hardened them into something else entirely. The culture clash between Rick's group and the Alexandrians was fascinating and uncomfortable. Rick's people couldn't relax. Carol pretended to be a meek, harmless housewife, while secretly assessing everyone and stealing weapons from the armory. Daryl couldn't bring himself to shower for days. Sasha had a breakdown, lying in an open grave full of dead walkers because the silence in the houses was worse than the noise outside. These were people who had been forged by violence and loss, dropped into a community that hadn't experienced either. And then the wolves came. Season 5, Episode 2 of the 6th season, JSS. While Rick and most of the fighters were away dealing with a massive herd at a nearby quarry, a group called the Wolves attacked Alexandria. These weren't the saviors. They weren't organised or strategic. The wolves were something more primal. They carved a W into their foreheads and into the foreheads of their victims. They believed that the living were already dead, that everyone was a wolf now, and that killing was just accelerating the inevitable. They came over the walls with machetes and axes, no guns. They didn't need guns. They attacked everyone they found, hacking people apart in the streets with a savagery that was genuinely shocking even by this show's standards. Alexandrians who had never been in a fight were cut down in their gardens, on their porches, in the street. It was a slaughter. Carol saved them. She put on one of the wolves' disguises, smeared a W on her forehead, and moved through the chaos like a ghost. She killed wolves systematically, quietly, moving from street to street, while the Alexandrians ran and screamed. Morgan, who had recently rejoined the group, took a different approach. He tried to capture wolves alive. He used his staff to disarm them. He let some of them go. Morgan believed in the sanctity of all life, even the lives of people who were actively killing his neighbours. This philosophical split between Carol and Morgan, kill or spare, pragmatism or mercy, would define both characters for seasons to come. The wolves' attack shattered Alexandria's innocence. These people had been living behind walls, pretending the world outside wasn't real. The wolves proved the walls weren't enough, that the violence could reach them. It was a preview of what was coming. Because if a group of unorganized psychopaths with machetes could breach Alexandria, what would happen when something truly organized showed up? Or worse, when the dead themselves came in numbers too large to count? The answer came in the form of a herd of thousands of walkers flooding through a collapsed watchtower. And what happened to one family in that herd is one of the most rapid, shocking sequences of violence the show ever committed to film. Season 6, Episode 9. No Way Out. This episode holds a 9.6 rating on IMDb, tying it with Too Far Gone and No Sanctuary as the highest rated episode in the entire series. It's the mid-season premiere that aired in February 2016, and it opens with a scene that feels almost disconnected from the main story, but serves as a terrifying introduction to the show's next major villain. Daryl, Sasha and Abraham are driving back toward Alexandria in a fuel truck when they're stopped by a group of armed men on motorcycles. The leader of the group steps forward and calmly informs them that everything they have, their truck, their weapons, their supplies, all of it now belongs to someone named Negan. He delivers this information with a smile. He tells Abraham that if he has to eat a certain kind of unpleasantry, he shouldn't nibble. He should just bite, chew, swallow, and repeat. It's the first time Negan's name is spoken in the series, and even though we don't see him, the way his men operate, the casual confidence of it, tells you everything you need to know about what's coming. Daryl, who had been taken to the back of the truck by one of the bikers, kills the man silently, and then steps out with an RPG launcher. He fires it into the entire group. One shot, all of them gone. It's explosive and cathartic, and it doesn't matter at all, because what's happening back in Alexandria is about to become one of the most harrowing sequences in television history. The walls of Alexandria have been breached. A massive herd of walkers, thousands of them, has poured through a collapsed watchtower and into the streets. The community is overrun. People are hiding in their houses, barricading doors, trying to stay quiet. The walkers are everywhere. There is no fighting this. There are too many. Rick's plan is desperate. He and his group are going to cover themselves in walker guts, the old trick they've used before, smearing the blood and viscera of the dead onto their clothes and skin so that the walkers can't distinguish them from their own. It works. It's disgusting and terrifying, but it works. The walkers shuffle past them without noticing. The group holds hands and walks slowly, silently through the herd. Rick leads. Then Jessie Anderson, a woman Rick has developed feelings for. Then her two sons, Ron and Sam. Then Carl, then Michonne. Gabriel offers to take baby Judith to the safety of his church, since even the quietest baby is a risk in a situation like this. Jessie tries to convince her younger son, Sam, to go with Gabriel, but Sam insists on staying with his mother. This is the first mistake. Sam is maybe 10 or 11 years old. He's been dealing with trauma since before the apocalypse. His father, Pete, was an abusive drunk who beat Jesse and terrorised the family. Pete was killed by Rick at the end of Season 5. Then the wolves attacked Alexandria, and Sam locked himself in his room and refused to come out. He's been fragile, anxious, barely holding himself together, and now he's walking through a sea of corpses, surrounded by things that will eat him alive if they notice him, holding his mother's hand with walker intestines smeared across his face. Carol, weeks earlier, had confronted Sam in a scene that seemed darkly funny at the time, but takes on a devastating weight in retrospect. Sam had found Carol stealing weapons from the armory, and she needed him to keep quiet. So she told him, in vivid detail, what would happen if he told anyone. She said he'd be tied to a tree and left for the walkers to find. No one would ever hear you scream because the walkers would eat you up while you were still alive, she told him. She was bluffing. She was trying to scare a kid into keeping a secret. But Sam believed her. He believed every word. And those words are now playing in his head as he walks through the herd. They're making progress. They're almost to the gate. The sun is going down and Rick changes the plan. Instead of heading to the quarry for vehicles, he decides they should head to the armory. He whispers the new plan to Jesse, who relays it down the line. But Sam isn't listening. Sam has stopped walking. A walker child is in the herd. A kid about Sam's age, dead, grey-skinned, shuffling alongside the adult walkers. Sam sees it and freezes. He starts to whimper. His breathing gets louder. Jesse whispers to him, "Sam, honey, you need to keep walking. You need to be quiet." But Sam is spiralling. The images in his head, Carol's threat, the walker child in front of him, the smell, the sounds, it's all collapsing in on him at once. He starts to cry, not quietly. He can't help it. The walkers nearest to him stop shuffling. Their heads turn. They lurch toward the sound, and they start biting. Sam is devoured alive. Right there, in the middle of the herd, with his mother holding his hand. The walkers tear into him, pulling at his clothes, his skin, his small body disappearing under a pile of grey hands and snapping jaws. It happens fast, but not fast enough. You see it. The show doesn't cut away. Jessie screams. She's still holding Sam's hand, even as the walkers are pulling him apart. Her grip tightens. She can't let go. And the scream, that scream, draws the walkers to her. They turn on Jessie next. She's grabbed from behind, bitten on the shoulder. Another walker seizes her arm. She's being pulled in multiple directions, and she still hasn't let go of Carl's hand, who is linked to her in the chain. Rick watches the woman he was falling in love with get torn apart in front of him. He flashes back to her face, her smile, the way she looked when things were normal. And then he's back in the present, and her grip on Carl's hand is going to get his son killed because the walkers are pulling her down, and Carl is attached to her. Rick raises his hatchet and chops off Jessie's hand at the wrist. Her body falls into the herd. Carl stumbles free. Ron, Jessie's older son, has been watching his mother and brother die. Something breaks in him. He picks up Carl's gun from the ground, where it fell during the chaos. He raises it. He aims at Rick. This teenager, who has just watched his entire family get eaten, is pointing a gun at the man he blames for everything. Michonne sees it. She moves. Her katana goes through Ron's body from behind, the blade emerging from his chest. But as Ron falls, his finger pulls the trigger. The gun fires, and the bullet goes through Carl's right eye. Carl turns to face his father. One hand raised to his face, blood pouring between his fingers. "Dad," he says, and then he collapses. Rick catches him. He scoops up his son's body and starts running through the herd. Not walking, not sneaking, running. He's screaming. He doesn't care about the walkers anymore. He doesn't care about anything except getting Carl to the infirmary. Michonne follows, cutting down every walker in their path. They get Carl inside. Denise, the community's only doctor, starts working on him immediately. Michonne assists. And Rick, standing there with his son's blood all over his clothes, does something that makes absolutely no rational sense and makes complete emotional sense. He picks up his hatchet, walks outside, and starts killing walkers. Alone. In the middle of a herd of thousands. He's swinging wildly, mechanically, destroying everything that moves around him. He's not thinking about survival. He's not thinking about strategy. He's thinking about his son lying on a table with a hole where his eye used to be, and he's turning that grief and rage into pure violence. One by one, the other survivors see him through their windows. Michonne finishes helping Denise and runs outside to join Rick. Then Aaron, then Spencer, then Heath, then Eugene, who admits to himself that this is the moment where everyone gets counted and he refuses to be a coward. Then more Alexandrians. People who have never fought, who have hidden behind walls for years, pick up weapons and walk out into the streets to fight alongside Rick. Glenn is trapped outside the walls, with Enid, desperately trying to save Maggie, who is stranded on a collapsing lookout platform, surrounded by walkers. Just as the walkers close in on Glenn, gunfire erupts from above. Abraham and Sasha have arrived with the fuel truck, standing on top of it with assault rifles, mowing down walkers. Glenn opens the gate, helps Maggie and Enid climb onto the truck, and Daryl comes up with the play that ends it all. He opens the fuel truck's valve, letting gasoline pour into a nearby pond, and then fires the RPG into the water. The lake erupts in flames. The fire draws every remaining walker in Alexandria toward it. They walk into the fire, they burn. By morning it's over. Every walker in Alexandria is dead. The streets are covered in corpses, but they're corpses that aren't getting back up. The community has been damaged but not destroyed. People are hurt, bloodied, exhausted, but alive. And Rick is sitting beside Carl's bed in the infirmary. His son is unconscious. One eye bandaged, the other closed. Rick talks to him. He tells Carl that he was wrong about the Alexandrians. He tells him they fought. He tells him he sees Deanna's vision now, the community she wanted to build, and he believes it's possible. He tells Carl he wants to show him the new world. Carl's fingers close around Rick's hand. He's going to live. He lost an eye. He'll wear a bandage and later a prosthetic for the rest of the series. But he's alive. And in a show that kills everyone, that moment of Carl's hand squeezing Rick is one of the purest, most hopeful moments in 11 seasons. No Way Out is the episode people point to when they talk about The Walking Dead at its absolute best. It's not just disturbing, it's devastating and triumphant at the same time. The Anderson family's wiped out in the span of about 30 seconds. A child is eaten alive on screen. A woman Rick cared about is torn apart in front of him. His son loses an eye, and then the entire community comes together and fights back in a sequence that is genuinely thrilling and moving. That balance, horror and hope in the same episode is what the show did better than anything else on television when it was firing on all cylinders. And it would need every ounce of that hope in the bank, because what came next was the darkest chapter in the show's history. A man with a baseball bat wrapped in barbed wire, a leather jacket, and a smile that made your stomach turn. His name was Negan, and the night he arrived is the night The Walking Dead changed forever. The entire second half of Season 6 was building toward one thing, one meeting, one man. Every time Rick's group tried to go somewhere, they found the road blocked. Saviors standing in the middle of the road, burning logs across the path, chains of walkers strung across the lane like a grotesque roadblock. They tried another route, blocked. Another, blocked. Every direction, every road, every option was systematically sealed off. They were being herded, like cattle. Like the Terminus people had herded them into a train car, but on a much larger scale. It was nighttime when the Saviors finally closed the trap. Rick's group was in the RV, trying to get Maggie to the hilltop because she was having complications with her pregnancy. They had been driving for hours, turning back at every roadblock, growing more desperate and more frightened with every dead end. They abandoned the RV and tried to go on foot through the woods, carrying Maggie on a stretcher. That's when they heard the whistling. It came from the trees, from every direction. Dozens of people, invisible in the darkness, whistling in unison. A low, steady, piercing sound that echoed through the forest. Lights snapped on, hundreds of them. The entire clearing was illuminated, and Rick's group was surrounded by what looked like an army. They were forced to their knees, all of them. Rick, Carl, Michonne, Daryl, Glenn, Maggie, Abraham, Sasha, Aaron, Eugene, Rosita, lined up on the ground, hands on their heads, lit by the headlights of the Saviour's trucks. Daryl was already injured, pale and bleeding, having been shot by Dwight earlier. Maggie was barely conscious, in pain from whatever was happening with the pregnancy. Glenn was on his knees beside her, terrified not for himself, but for her. A door opened on one of the RV's boots, hit the gravel, and Negan walked out. Jeffrey Dean Morgan. That's the actor. And the performance he gave in his first full scene is one of the most magnetic, terrifying introductions of a villain in the history of television. Negan is tall, broad, wearing a leather jacket, with a red scarf and a baseball bat resting on his shoulder. The bat is wrapped in barbed wire, and her name is Lucille. He says this like he's introducing you to a friend. Negan walks down the line of kneeling survivors, making eye contact with each of them. He's smiling, he's cracking jokes, he's charismatic in a way that makes your skin crawl, because you know what he's about to do, and he seems to be genuinely enjoying the build-up. He explains the New World Order. Rick's group killed a lot of his people. That needs to be punished. But he's not going to kill all of them. He's going to kill one. Just one. As a lesson, I want you to work for me, he tells them. You have stuff, you give it to me. That's the New World Order. He calls Lucille awesome. He remarks on Abraham squaring up to him, impressed by the courage, but not intimidated by it. When he threatens Maggie, Glenn screams and lunges forward. The Saviors drag him back in line. Negan notes the outburst and moves on. And then he starts the game. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. He points Lucille down the line as he recites the rhyme, pausing on each person, letting the tension build. Every face in that lineup is someone we've been watching for years. Any one of them could be the victim. The camera shows each person's face as the bat passes them. Fear, defiance, tears, acceptance. Season 6 ended right there, on that cliffhanger. Lucille comes crashing down and the screen goes to black from the victim's point of view. Blood trickles down the screen. The victim's breathing gets ragged, and we don't find out who it was until the Season 7 premiere, 6 months later. Half a year of speculation, theories, grief, and dread. Season 7, Episode 1. The Day Will Come When You Won't Be. That title is a callback to Season 1, when Dr. Jenner at the CDC told Rick, "The day will come when you won't be." As in, you won't be alive, you won't be here. It was a promise from the very beginning of the series, and now it was being delivered. The episode doesn't show you the kill right away. It opens on Rick's face, shell-shocked, staring at the ground, blood on his cheeks. Negan is crouching next to him, taunting him. Rick mumbles, "I'm going to kill you." Negan laughs. "What? I didn't quite hear that." Rick repeats himself. "Not today, not tomorrow, but I'm going to kill you." Negan responds by dragging Rick into the RV and driving him out into the fog. For the next 20 minutes, the episode cuts between the present, with Negan psychologically torturing Rick, and flashbacks that slowly reveal what happened in the clearing. It's a masterful piece of editing because it makes you relive the dread twice. You know someone is dead. You know it's going to be shown. And the show makes you wait. The first victim is Abraham Ford. Negan's game of eeny, meeny, miny, mo lands on him. Abraham knew it. He straightened up. He looked Negan in the eye. He flashed a peace sign to Sasha, his partner, a small, quiet goodbye. And Negan brought Lucille down on his head. Abraham didn't go down immediately. He sat back up, blood pouring down his face, and said, "Suck my nuts," defiant to the end. Negan laughed, impressed and amused, and then hit him again, and again, and again, until there was nothing left, until Abraham's head was a mass of bone and blood, and the man who had carried himself like a soldier through the entire apocalypse was gone. The group was devastated. Rosita was sobbing. Sasha was in shock. Everyone was crying. Negan walked along the line, swinging Lucille, which was now dripping with Abraham's blood and brain matter. He stopped in front of Rosita and demanded she look at the bat. "Take a look at my dirty girl," he said. Rosita couldn't look up. Negan screamed at her. He leaned in close and yelled in her face. Daryl snapped. He leapt up from the line and punched Negan in the jaw. The Saviors tackled him immediately. Dwight pointed Daryl's own crossbow at his head and asked if he could kill him. Negan said no. He couldn't kill Daryl. That would be too easy, but there had to be consequences. "I told you there'd be no exceptions," Negan said, looking at the group. "The first one is free, but nobody else gets a pass." He reminded them that this is what happens when someone steps out of line. And then, without warning, without another game, without another speech, he swung Lucille down on Glenn's head. Maggie screamed. Glenn managed to sit up. The blow had dented his skull. One of his eyes was dislodged, pushed out of its socket by the force of the impact. He was trying to speak. His mouth was moving. Blood was everywhere. And somehow, with the last coherent thought he had, Glenn looked at Maggie and said, "Maggie, I'll find you." Negan paused. He seemed almost apologetic for a moment. Almost. "I am sorry about this," he said, and then he continued. He beat Glenn to death in the same manner as Abraham. Blow after blow after blow, until there was nothing recognizable left. Glenn's body twitched on the ground. "Lucille is thirsty," Negan said. "She is a vampire bat." Stephen Yeun played Glenn from the very first episode of the series. Glenn was the voice on the radio that saved Rick in Atlanta. He was the pizza delivery guy who became a leader. He loved Maggie so completely that his last words, with his skull caved in and his eye hanging from his face, were about finding her. Not goodbye, not help me, "I'll find you." That's what he said with his dying breath, and it wrecked people. This episode caused actual viewer backlash. Some longtime fans quit the show. Critics debated whether the violence had gone too far. The special effects, supervised by Greg Nicotero, were so realistic that people were genuinely sickened. But the show's creators argued that this was the point. Negan had to be established as a threat so overwhelming that everything after it would carry weight. And they were right. From this episode forward, every time Negan appeared on screen, every time someone mentioned his name, you felt it. After the kills, Negan wasn't finished with Rick. He drove him into the fog in the RV, forced him to retrieve his axe from the roof while surrounded by walkers, and then brought him back to the clearing for one final act of humiliation. He lined up Carl. He had Rick's axe. He told Rick to cut off Carl's left arm. Cut it off, or every single person in the lineup would die. Rick begged. He sobbed. He offered himself instead. Negan wouldn't budge. Carl, his son, the boy who had survived losing his mother, losing his eye, losing everything, just looked at his father and said, "Just do it, Dad." He was trying to make it easier. A 14-year-old boy putting his arm on the ground and telling his father to cut it off to save everyone else. Rick raised the axe. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. Tears were streaming down his face, and at the last possible second, Negan stopped him. "You answer to me," Negan said. "You provide for me. You belong to me." He wasn't actually going to make Rick cut Carl's arm off. He just needed Rick to be willing to do it. He needed to see Rick break, and he did. Rick was broken. Completely, utterly broken. The leader, the man who had survived Terminus, and the governor, and the prison, and the herd, was kneeling in the dirt, crying, holding an axe over his son's arm, ready to do whatever Negan told him to do. The day came when Rick Grimes wouldn't be who he was. And that day was this one. This episode, for all its brutality, for all the criticism it received, remains one of the most important hours of The Walking Dead, because it redefined what the show was willing to do. It killed a character who had been there since the beginning, in a way that was designed to be as painful to watch as it was for the characters to experience. It didn't hide behind suggestion or implication. It showed you, and whether you thought that was brave or gratuitous, you never forgot it. Glenn and Abraham were buried near Alexandria. Maggie, pregnant and grieving, vowed to make Negan pay. It would take 2 full seasons, but she would. And in the meantime, the group would endure Negan's rule. The Saviour era was its own kind of horror. Not the sharp, sudden violence of the lineup, but a slow, grinding humiliation that lasted for months. Negan's system was simple. He owned everything. Every community, every resource, every person. His people would show up at your gates, take half of what you had, and leave. If you resisted, they killed someone. If you hid supplies, they killed someone. If you looked at them wrong, they killed someone. It was domestication through fear, and it worked. Daryl was taken prisoner at the sanctuary, Negan's compound. He was locked in a dark cell, fed dog food sandwiches, and subjected to psychological torture. They played the same song on a loop, hour after hour, day after day, a cheerful pop song called Easy Street that was designed to break him through sheer repetition. They stripped him of his clothes and gave him a dirty sweatshirt with the letter A on it. And for something Negan never fully explained, but which clearly meant something degrading. Dwight, who had once been in a similar position before submitting, tried to break Daryl by showing him a photograph of Glenn's destroyed body. Daryl looked at it and wept, but he didn't break. He never said the words Negan wanted to hear, which were simply, "I am Negan." Spencer Monroe tried a different approach. He tried to ingratiate himself with Negan, going behind Rick's back to suggest that Negan remove Rick from power and install Spencer as leader instead. Negan listened to the pitch while they played pool in the middle of the street, and then Negan said something that perfectly encapsulated his twisted worldview. He said that Rick was out there swallowing his hatred and gathering supplies despite wanting nothing more than to kill Negan. That took guts, Negan said. Spencer, on the other hand, was sneaking around behind Rick's back instead of confronting him directly, which meant he had no guts at all. And then Negan plunged a knife into Spencer's abdomen and pulled upward, disemboweling him in the middle of the street. "There they are," Negan said, looking at the intestines spilling onto the asphalt. "They were inside you the whole time." He treated it like a punchline. The Saviour era also gave us one of the show's most quietly devastating moments. Sasha, who had lost Abraham to Negan's bat, went on a suicide mission to assassinate Negan at the sanctuary. She was captured. Eugene, who had defected to the Saviours out of pure survival instinct, visited her in her cell and told her the truth about why he joined Negan. He said he had never been as scared as the night in the woods when Abraham died, and he joined the Saviours to make sure he never felt that way again. He recommended she do the same. Sasha refused. And when Negan tried to use her as a weapon against Rick's group, transporting her in a coffin to present as a hostage, she swallowed a poison pill Eugene had made for her. She died in that coffin. And when Negan opened it at Alexandria's gates, expecting a living bargaining chip, Sasha came out as a walker and attacked him. She had turned her own death into one final act of resistance. These moments, Spencer's disembowelment, Daryl's imprisonment, Sasha's coffin, they were all part of the Saviour era's particular brand of horror. It wasn't about walkers or wilderness survival. It was about what happens when one person has total power over others and uses it with a smile. It was about the dehumanization that comes with subjugation, the way it eats away at people's dignity and self-respect until some of them, like Eugene, decide that survival at any cost is better than standing up and possibly dying. But the show wasn't done with its disturbing chapters, not even close, because after Negan, after the Saviours, after everything they'd survived, a new threat emerged. One that wore the dead like clothing and whispered through the herds like ghosts. They called themselves the Whisperers, and what their leader, Alpha, did at a community fair would leave scars that lasted until the very end of the series. By season 9, the show had jumped forward in time, about 6 years give or take. Rick Grimes was gone, believed dead after he blew up a bridge to stop a massive herd from reaching the communities. In reality, he survived and was taken away by a helicopter belonging to a mysterious group, but nobody knew that. As far as Michonne, Daryl, Carol, and the rest of the world was concerned, Rick was dead. They mourned him. They moved on. Sort of. The communities had grown and evolved. Alexandria was stable. The hilltop had become a functioning agricultural settlement. The kingdom, led by Ezekiel, was thriving, but the relationships between the communities had frayed. Michonne, traumatized by a betrayal we'd learn about later, had isolated Alexandria from the other settlements. People didn't travel between communities the way they used to. Trust had eroded. Bridges, both literal and figurative, had fallen. Then Jesus, one of the hilltop's best fighters, was killed during a mission. He was fighting what he thought were walkers in a graveyard when one of them ducked under his blade and stabbed him through the chest. A walker, ducking, stabbing. It was impossible. Walkers didn't do that. Walkers couldn't do that. Daryl pulled the mask off the attacker's face and found a living person underneath, someone wearing the skin of a dead person as a disguise, walking among the dead, whispering commands to the herd to direct its movements. The dead weren't talking, the living were, and they called themselves the Whisperers. The Whisperers are, I think, the most conceptually terrifying antagonists in the entire Walking Dead franchise. The governor was a psychopath with a town. Negan was a dictator with an army. But the Whisperers were something else entirely. They had abandoned every remnant of civilization. They didn't live in buildings. They didn't use names, at least not in the traditional sense. They walked with the herds dressed in the rotting skin of the dead, moving as one with the walkers, using the dead as both camouflage and weapon. Their leader was a woman who called herself Alpha. Alpha, played by Samantha Morton, shaved her head. She spoke in a quiet, flat monotone. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She controlled a herd of thousands, maybe tens of thousands of walkers, and she could direct that herd at any community she wanted. Her second in command was Beta, a giant of a man played by Ryan Hurst, who never removed his mask in public and whose physical presence was enough to make anyone back down. Alpha's philosophy was simple and horrifying. She believed that the old world was dead and that trying to rebuild it was a weakness. Civilization, community, law, love, all of it was pretense. The only truth was survival, and survival meant becoming part of nature's order. Predator and prey, strong and weak. The Whisperers didn't build walls because walls were lies. They didn't plant crops because agriculture was domestication. They lived like animals because they believed that's what humans always were underneath the veneer. When her daughter Lydia defected to the communities, choosing to live with them rather than return to the Whisperers, Alpha's response wasn't rage, it was cold calculation. She told Daryl that her people would leave the communities alone, as long as the communities stayed out of Whisperer territory. She would mark the boundary, and Daryl should not cross it. She marked it at the fair. The kingdom hosted a community fair, a gathering designed to rebuild the connections between Alexandria, the hilltop, and the kingdom. People came from all three communities. There were games, a movie screening, trade goods, and conversation. It felt like a celebration. It felt like hope. Alpha walked in wearing stolen clothes. She disguised herself as an Alexandrian named Deborah, introduced herself to Ezekiel, and walked through the fair with nobody recognizing her. She watched. She listened. She moved through the crowd like a ghost, and one by one, throughout the day and into the evening, people went missing. Tara, who had become a leader at the hilltop, Enid, who had grown from a scared teenager into a confident young woman studying to be a doctor, Henry, Carol and Ezekiel's adopted son, who had fallen in love with Lydia, DJ and Frankie, two reformed saviors who had joined the communities, Tammy Rose, Rodney, Addie, Ozzy and Alec, two highwaymen who had recently allied with the kingdom. 10 people, taken from the fair, quietly, one at a time. Daryl, Michonne, Carol and Yumiko were sent to investigate after Alpha forced Daryl on a walk to the edge of a cliff, overlooking a massive ravine where her herd was gathered below. Thousands upon thousands of walkers and whisperers moving together like a river of dead flesh. She showed him this to make a point. This was what she could unleash if the communities crossed her line. On the way back, they found Sadiq. He was beaten, bloody, tied to a tree. He pointed them toward a nearby hill, and on that hill, there were 10 wooden pikes driven into the ground. On top of each pike was a severed head. Ozzy, Alec, DJ Frankie, Tammy Rose, Rodney, Addie, Enid, Tara, Henry. Each head was still animate. The eyes were open. The jaws were moving. They were reanimated, mounted on spikes, staring out across the landscape as a border marker. This was Alpha's line. This was her message. Cross it and the herd comes. The camera moved slowly from pike to pike. As each head was revealed, the show cut to flashbacks of people at the fair asking where the victims were. Have you seen Tara? Where's Henry? I haven't seen Enid. The juxtaposition was devastating. While everyone was enjoying the fair, while people were laughing and trading and watching movies, these 10 people were being led away and murdered. Daryl saw Henry's head and immediately turned to stop Carol from seeing it, but he was too late. Carol looked up and saw her son's face mounted on a spike, reanimated mouth moving silently. She collapsed. Daryl caught her. He held her and said, "Look at me, look at me." But she couldn't look away. The parallel to look at the flowers was not accidental. Carol had told Lizzie to look at the flowers before killing her. Now someone was telling Carol to look at them, to look away from the horror. And just like Lizzie, Carol couldn't. The thing she was seeing was too large, too final, too terrible to look away from. Sadiq survived to tell the story. He stood before a gathering of the communities and told them what happened in those final moments. The victims hadn't gone quietly. They hadn't surrendered. They had fought, even with their hands bound, even outnumbered. They had fought for each other. They had given each other courage in the end. Sadiq's account of their bravery was his way of honouring them, of making sure the communities remembered not just how they died, but how they chose to face it. The pike scene is often cited as one of the most shocking moments in the entire series, and what makes it so effective is that it comes after a period of relative peace. The communities were rebuilding. People were happy. There was a fair with music and food, and then 10 heads on pikes, and the realisation that all of that happiness was happening while these people were being murdered just out of sight. It also hit hard because of who was on those pikes. Tara had been with the show since season 4, Enid since season 5. Henry was Carol's last chance at motherhood, the last child she allowed herself to love after losing Sophia, after losing Lizzie and Mika. Every head on those pikes was a relationship the audience had invested in. It wasn't nameless extras up there, it was people we knew. The Whisperer War that followed consumed 2 full seasons and culminated in some of the most ambitious episodes the show ever attempted. Negan, of all people, was sent as a double agent to infiltrate the Whisperers. He earned Alpha's trust over weeks, fought alongside her people, and eventually lured her into the woods, where he slit her throat. He brought her severed head to Carol, who had orchestrated the whole plan. Carol, the woman who lost her son to Alpha's pikes, had played the longest game of anyone in the series. But even with Alpha dead, even with the Whisperer War ending, the damage was done. Carol was destroyed by guilt. She nearly died multiple times, not from walkers or enemies, but from her own recklessness. There's a haunting scene late in season 10 where Carol is trapped under debris and hallucinating. She sees Alpha standing over her, taunting her about everyone she's lost. Sophia, Lizzie, Mika, Henry, Ezekiel. Alpha tells her to look at the flowers like you're supposed to give up, to die. Carol fights through it. She tells the hallucination, it's never too late, and Alpha disappears. Carol survived, but she was never the same. None of them were. The Whisperers took something from the communities that couldn't be replaced. Not just lives, but the belief that they could build something lasting. The pike said, "Your walls are nothing. Your communities are nothing. We can reach inside your homes and take anyone we want." And for a long time, the communities believed it. But the pikes and the Whisperer War, as devastating as they were were just one chapter in a series filled with quiet, personal horrors that didn't involve grand villains or large-scale battles. Some of the most disturbing moments in The Walking Dead happened between two people in a room, or on a road, or in a revolving door. And those are the ones we should talk about now. One of the things that made The Walking Dead different from most shows about the apocalypse was that it understood the horror didn't always need to come from a villain or a massive set piece. Some of the most disturbing moments in the entire series happened in the margins. Quiet scenes, small interactions, moments where the camera lingered on a face or a detail and let the audience feel the weight of what had just happened without anyone explaining it. These are the ones that creep into your head at night. These are the ones you don't expect to remember, but somehow always do. Let's go back to Morgan. Let's remember him from the first episode, the man who couldn't shoot his wife through the scope. We talked about that scene earlier, and I said the consequences of that hesitation would come back to haunt him. Well, Season 3, Episode 12. Clear. It's one of the best episodes in the entire series, and it's almost entirely a conversation between two men in a room full of weapons and madness. Rick, Carl and Michonne are driving through Morgan's town, the same town from the first episode. They find the streets transformed. There are elaborate traps everywhere, tripwires, sharpened stakes, written warnings spray-painted on walls and on the road. "Turn around and live," one of them says. The whole town has been booby-trapped by someone who clearly doesn't want visitors. They find Morgan on a rooftop, armed and unhinged. He shoots at them. Carl shoots him in the chest, but Morgan is wearing body armor. They subdue him and bring him inside a building that Morgan has turned into a fortress. Every wall is covered in writing. Maps, diagrams, lists of names, rambling messages about clearing and not clearing, about what's owed and what's lost. It looks like the inside of a serial killer's apartment, except the serial killer is a grieving father who lost his mind because he couldn't pull a trigger. Morgan tells Rick what happened. After Rick left, Morgan tried to teach Dwayne how to survive. He taught him to shoot. He fortified their position. He was doing well. But Jenny, Morgan's wife, the walker he couldn't kill, was still out there. She kept coming back, wandering the streets, and Morgan kept letting her live. One day, Morgan was in a cellar, or she, scavenging for supplies. When he came back up, Jenny was in the doorway. Dwayne was standing in front of her with a gun raised. But Dwayne was his father's son. He couldn't pull the trigger either. He hesitated, and Jenny bit him. Morgan's son was killed by the walker that Morgan should have put down months ago. Morgan finally killed Jenny after that. Too late, weeks too late. His son was dead because of his mercy, because of his inability to do what needed to be done, and the guilt consumed him. He went mad alone in that town, building traps and writing on walls, and clearing the dead from the streets, like a one-man army fighting a war that was already over. The line that kills me is when Morgan says, "The weak people, we have inherited the earth." He's not talking about the walkers. He's talking about himself, about the people who couldn't adapt fast enough, couldn't make the hard choices fast enough, and paid for it with everything they had. Rick tries to bring Morgan with them. Morgan refuses. He tells Rick, "You will be torn apart by teeth or bullets." He gives Rick the weapons and sends him away. And the show lets Morgan sit there in his fortress of grief and madness, alone, surrounded by the words he's written to himself about a world that no longer makes sense. Now, jumping ahead to Season 5, Episode 9. What happened and what's going on? This episode is the death of Tyrese, and it's told in a way that's unlike anything else in the series. Tyrese is bitten during a visit to Noah's home community, which they hoped would be a safe haven, but turned out to have been overrun. He's bitten on the arm in a child's bedroom, and as the infection takes hold, the episode becomes a fever dream. Tyrese hallucinates. He sees the ghosts of people who have died. Martin, the Terminus man, the governor, Bob, Beth, Lizzie and Mika appear to him, bloody and smiling, looking exactly as they did when they died. "It's better now," Mika tells him. Mika. The radio in the room keeps broadcasting news reports, recounting atrocities from around the world, wars and massacres and suffering. The hallucinations argue with each other. The governor tells Tyrese this is his punishment. Beth and Bob tell him it's okay to let go. Tyrese dies in the car while the group is trying to drive him to safety. Rick, Michonne, Noah and Glenn are in the car with him, driving as fast as they can, and he just slips away. The funeral at the beginning of the episode, which you initially think is for Beth, is revealed to be for Tyrese. It's a devastating misdirect. The whole episode was his death, stretched across 45 minutes of hallucinatory grief. Season 5, Episode 8, Coda. This is the one where Beth dies. Beth Green, Herschel's younger daughter, had been kidnapped by a group operating out of Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta. She was held there, essentially as a prisoner, forced to work under a corrupt system run by a woman named Dawn. After weeks of captivity, Rick's group arrived to negotiate Beth's release. An exchange was arranged, hostages on both sides. It seemed like it was going to work. Beth was walking toward Rick. She was steps away from freedom, and then she stopped. She turned back to Dawn and stabbed her with a small pair of scissors she had concealed. Nobody expected it. Dawn's gun went off reflexively. The bullet hit Beth in the head. She dropped. Dead. Instantaneous. Daryl, standing right there, shot Dawn immediately, but it didn't matter. Beth was gone. The group walked out of the hospital carrying her body, and when Maggie, who had been outside waiting, saw Daryl emerge with Beth in his arms, she collapsed to the ground screaming. She had just found out her sister was alive, and now she was dead. In the same moment, the cruelty of that timing still bothers people to this day. Noah, Season 5, Episode 14, Spend. Noah was the young man Beth had helped escape from the hospital. He was hopeful, smart and kind. He had started keeping a journal because he wanted to document the rebuilding of civilization. Reg Monroe, the architect of Alexandria, had taken him under his wing. Noah was going to learn to build. He was going to help design the future. During a supply run to a warehouse, the group got trapped. Walkers flooded the building. In the chaos, Noah, Glenn, and a coward named Nicholas ended up stuck in a revolving door with walkers on both sides. Nicholas panicked and forced his way out, which opened the door to the walkers on Noah's side. Glenn was holding Noah's hands through the glass. He was pulling as hard as he could. But the walkers grabbed Noah's legs and dragged him backward into the doorframe against the glass. Glenn had to watch from inches away as walkers tore Noah apart on the other side of the glass. They ripped his face off. They pulled his jaw from his skull. Glenn could see every detail. He could feel Noah's hands slipping from his grip, and there was nothing he could do. This death was so graphic that it stands out even in a show known for graphic deaths. The revolving door, the glass creating this horrible, intimate window into the killing. Glenn's helpless expression as he watches it happen. It was cruel, and it was random, and it was the kind of death that serves no narrative purpose other than to remind you that this world does not care about your potential. Noah wanted to build. The world ate him in a revolving door. Season 8, Episode 9. Honor. Carl's death. This is the one that broke the fandom. Carl Grimes, played by Chandler Riggs from the very first episode, was bitten in the mid-season finale while saving Siddiq, a stranger he found in the woods. Carl chose to help Siddiq because he believed his father would have wanted him to. He believed in mercy. He believed in helping people. The bite was on his abdomen, hidden under his shirt. He kept it secret for hours while Alexandria was under attack. When he finally showed Rick and Michonne, there was no ambiguity, no miracle cure, no last-minute save. He was going to die, and the show gave him an entire episode to say goodbye. Carl's last hours are spent writing letters to Rick, to Michonne, to Negan. He tells Rick about his vision of the future, a future where everyone lives in peace, where there's no more fighting, where even Negan is part of the community. tending a garden. He tells Rick that he can still make that vision real. It can be like that again, Carl says. You can still be who you were. He's talking about the Rick who brought strangers into the prison. The Rick who believed in mercy. Rick and Michonne carry Carl to a church. They lay him down. Carl tells them he loves them. He picks up his gun. He's not going to let them do it. He's going to prevent his own reanimation, himself. Rick and Michonne step outside. They wait by the door, and a single suppressed gunshot echoes from inside the church. They bury him in the Alexandria graveyard. Carl's death was controversial because it deviated from the comics, where Carl survives to the very end. Many fans felt cheated, but within the show's own logic, there's something devastatingly perfect about it. Carl died because he chose to save a stranger. He died because he believed in mercy. He died living out the values that his father had taught him and then forgotten. And his death became the thing that brought Rick back from the edge, that reminded Rick of who he used to be and who he could still become. There are so many more I could mention. The wolves attacking Alexandria, killing people in the streets with machetes while Carol, disguised as one of them, moved through the chaos silently, eliminating them one by one. Denise Cloyd, the community's doctor, shot through the eye with an arrow mid-sentence while giving an optimistic speech about courage, killed by Dwight using Daryl's own crossbow. Siddiq being strangled to death by Dante, a Whisperer spy who had embedded himself in Alexandria as a trusted member of the community. The feral humans in the hospital basement that Connie encountered, living like animals in the dark, and the way the show dropped the sound to mirror her deafness, so you felt what she felt. Each of these moments represents The Walking Dead doing something that most shows are afraid to do, killing characters the audience loves in ways that feel real, that feel arbitrary, that feel unfair. Because that's the point. The apocalypse doesn't give you a dramatic death scene with swelling music and a meaningful final speech. Sometimes you get eaten in a revolving door. Sometimes you get shot by a stray bullet. Sometimes you get bitten helping a stranger, and you spend your last night writing letters by candlelight. That's the horror, not the walkers, the randomness, the unfairness, the things that happen to good people for no reason at all. And yet even in all of that darkness, even surrounded by all of that loss, the people in this world kept going. They kept fighting. They kept choosing to care about each other, to build communities, to have children, to plant gardens, to sing songs around campfires. That stubbornness, that refusal to let the world win, is what made the disturbing moments matter. Because the horror only hurts when you care about the people experiencing it. And we cared about these people a lot. We've been at this for a while now, and if you're still with me, I appreciate it. Whether your eyes are closed or you're staring at the ceiling, whether you're drifting off or hanging on every word, I'm glad you're here. We've gone through some of the darkest territory this show ever explored, and before we wrap up tonight, I want to talk about something that I think gets lost when people focus on the violence and the shock value of The Walking Dead. I want to talk about what all of it meant, because these weren't just disturbing moments for the sake of being disturbing. Every single one of them was trying to say something. Let's start with Laurie's death. That scene in the boiler room wasn't about gore or shock, it was about sacrifice. Laurie knew she was going to die. She accepted it with a clarity that most people in this world never found. Her final words to Carl weren't about herself, they were about him. She told him to stay strong, to stay good, to not let the world change him. And then she let Maggie cut her open so her child could live. Judith Grimes exists because Laurie chose to die. That's not a horror scene. That's a love story told in the worst possible circumstances. Carl having to shoot his mother afterward is the part that makes it unbearable, and it should. A 12-year-old boy shouldn't have to do that. In any sane world, no child would ever face that choice. But the world of The Walking Dead isn't sane. It demands things of its people that shouldn't be demanded, and the measure of a character is how they respond. Carl responded by putting his mother down before she could turn. He carried that weight silently. He never talked about it. He never cried about it on screen. He just walked forward, a little harder, a little quieter, with something gone from his eyes that would never come back. Rick's spiral afterward, the phone calls, the hallucinations of Laurie, the violent outbursts against walkers, that wasn't just a plot device, it was a portrait of grief in a world with no grief counsellors, no funeral homes, no support system. Rick had no one to talk to. He had no time to process. The dead kept coming, and the living kept needing him to lead, and he just shoved everything down until it erupted as madness. The show understood something essential about trauma. It doesn't wait for a convenient time. It comes when it comes, and if you don't deal with it, it deals with you. The governor represents the opposite end of that spectrum. He was a man who tried to freeze the world in place. He kept his daughter alive as a walker because he couldn't accept that she was gone. He kept the heads in the fish tanks because controlling the dead was the closest thing he had to controlling a world that had taken everything from him. His violence wasn't random. It was the violence of a man who believed he could force reality to be something it wasn't. And when reality pushed back, he broke. Herschel's death at the governor's hand was the show saying something important about hope. Herschel believed, until the very end, that people could change, that peace was possible, that the governor could be reached. He was wrong. And the show killed him for being wrong, but it didn't make him look foolish. That small smile Herschel gave Rick in his final moments wasn't the smile of a man who had been proven wrong. It was the smile of a man who had heard Rick say the right things and knew that even if this was the end for him, the right ideas would survive. Herschel died believing in something. The governor died believing in nothing. And the show made it pretty clear which one of those was the real tragedy. The Grove. I keep coming back to The Grove because I think it's the most important episode the show ever produced. Not the best, necessarily, though it's up there, but the most important. Because it asked a question that no other episode dared to ask. What do you do with a child who is beyond help? Lizzie wasn't evil. That's the crucial thing. She wasn't a villain. She was a child with a fundamental misunderstanding of the world she was living in. She couldn't distinguish between the living and the dead. She saw walkers as friends. She believed that death was just a transformation, not an ending, and she acted on that belief with the same conviction and innocence that children bring to everything they do. She killed Mika because she genuinely believed Mika would come back. She was going to do the same to Judith because she wanted to prove her point. Carol's choice to kill Lizzie wasn't about punishment. It was about protection. Lizzie couldn't be around other people because she would hurt them. Not out of malice, but out of a misunderstanding so deep it couldn't be corrected. There was no institution to take her to, no therapist to treat her, no medication to stabilize her. In the old world, Lizzie would have been hospitalized and treated. In this world, there was only Carol, a field of wildflowers, and a revolver. The reason "look at the flowers" became such an iconic phrase in the fandom is that it captures the entire moral dilemma of the apocalypse in 3 words. It's gentle, it's an act of kindness even, telling a frightened child to look at something beautiful instead of something terrible. And it's the last thing she hears before she dies. Mercy and cruelty braided together so tightly that you can't separate them. That's The Walking Dead in a single scene. Terminus and the cannibalism arc forced the show to confront a different kind of moral question. When does survival stop justifying what you do to survive? The Terminus people had a legitimate grievance. They were victimized, they were brutalized, they fought back, and then they decided they'd never be victims again. On paper, that sounds almost heroic. In practice, it turned them into something worse than the people who hurt them. They became the butchers. They processed human beings like cattle. They ate them. The show didn't dismiss their pain. Mary's explanation to Carol was honest. You could see the grief and rage behind her words, but the show also didn't excuse them. There's a line between surviving and becoming a monster, and the Terminus people crossed it so far that they couldn't even see the line anymore. Gareth running a slaughterhouse with a clipboard, checking off numbers, treating mass murder like a Tuesday afternoon. That's what happens when you let trauma justify everything. The Anderson family massacre in No Way Out is the one that haunts me the most, personally. Not because it was the most violent, though it was brutal, but because of how fast it happened. Sam breaks down. Walkers take him. Jessie freezes. Walkers take her. Ron picks up the gun. Michonne stabs him. Carl loses his eye. 5 or 6 seconds, maybe less. An entire family erased and a boy maimed, all because a child was too frightened to keep walking. And the thing is, you can't blame Sam. He was a kid. He was scared. He had been traumatized by his abusive father, by the wolves, by Carol's threats, and now he was walking through a sea of corpses in the dark. Of course he broke down. Of course he cried. He was doing the most natural thing in the world, and it killed him and his entire family, and nearly killed Carl. The show was making a point about how this world punishes weakness, even the understandable, sympathetic kind. Even the kind that any of us might show if we were in the same situation. Negan and the lineup. I've thought about this one a lot. The criticism the show received for the violence of that episode was fair, in a way. It was extreme. Glenn's death was shown in graphic detail, and the audience had to sit with it in a way that was genuinely uncomfortable. But I think the discomfort was the point. Negan needed to be the worst thing that had ever happened to these characters. Not in a philosophical sense, not in an ideological sense, but in a visceral, physical, immediate sense. He needed to be the kind of threat that makes you sick. Because everything that comes after, every moment of Rick's submission, every moment of Daryl's imprisonment, every moment of Maggie's grief, all of it only works if you believe that Negan is truly terrifying. And after that episode, you believed it. You believed it down to your bones. But here's the thing about Negan that makes the show more interesting than a simple villain story. He changes. Over the course of several seasons, locked in a jail cell in Alexandria, Negan begins to reckon with what he's done. He forms a relationship with Judith, of all people. He helps the communities during the Whisperer War. He kills Alpha when nobody else could. And in the final season, standing in a lineup himself, about to lose someone he cares about, he finally understands what he did to Maggie that night in the clearing. He tells her, "When I was in that lineup last night, about to lose everything, I finally understood what you must have felt when I killed Glenn." And he apologizes. He actually says the words. Maggie's response isn't forgiveness exactly. It's something more complicated than that. She acknowledges what he said. She doesn't kill him. She lets him live. But she doesn't hug him or tell him it's okay, because it's not okay. Glenn is still dead. Herschel Jr. is growing up without a father. Negan's apology doesn't undo anything. It just adds a layer of complexity to a relationship that should have been simple, killer and victim, but somehow isn't. The Whisperer Pikes represented the death of innocence for the communities. Before the Pikes, there was this idea that walls could keep you safe, that if you built high enough and fought hard enough, you could create a little pocket of the old world inside the new one. The Pikes destroyed that illusion. Alpha walked into the fair in disguise. She took people from inside the walls, from behind the gates, from the middle of a celebration. The walls didn't help. The gates didn't help. The weapons and the training and the vigilance, none of it helped. Carol losing Henry on those Pikes was the cruelest irony. Carol had already lost her biological daughter, Sophia, in season 2. She lost Lizzie and Mika in the Grove. She adopted Henry because she dared to love again, dared to be a mother again after losing every child she'd ever tried to protect. And the world took him too. The Whisperers put his head on a stick and used it to mark a territorial boundary. That's what Carol's love was reduced to. A warning sign. But Carol survived. She always survives. And that's maybe the most disturbing thing about her character. She's lost more than anyone else on the show, and she's still standing. She carries the weight of every child she's buried, every impossible choice she's made, every moment of mercy and cruelty she's enacted, and she keeps going. Not because she wants to. There are moments where it's clear she doesn't want to. There are moments where she actively tries to give up. But something in her won't let her stop. Something in her keeps choosing life, even when life is nothing but loss. The Walking Dead ran for 11 seasons and 177 episodes. It premiered on October 31st, 2010, and aired its final episode on November 20th, 2022. Over those 12 years, it went from a modest cable drama to one of the highest-rated shows in television history, regularly pulling in audiences of 15 to 17 million viewers at its peak. It won multiple Saturn Awards, earned critical acclaim for performances by actors like Andrew Lincoln, Melissa McBride, Norman Reedus, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Lauren Cohan, and Danai Gurira, and spawned a franchise that continues to expand. The spin-offs are carrying forward that legacy in their own distinct ways. Dead City follows Negan and Maggie navigating their complicated history in the ruins of Manhattan, a setting that transforms New York's iconic skyline into a vertical maze of death and darkness. Negan has become something he never expected, a man trying to do right by a little girl named Ginny, while still wrestling with the monster he used to be. And Maggie has to decide, over and over again, whether the man who killed her husband can ever be trusted, can ever be forgiven, can ever be anything other than the worst night of her life. Daryl Dixon sends the franchise overseas to France, where Daryl discovers a new community, a new purpose, and a new kind of walker that is faster, more aggressive, and more dangerous than anything the American survivors ever encountered. The French setting gave the show a completely different visual identity, with centuries-old architecture and European landscapes replacing the Georgia forests and Virginia suburbs. It also introduced Isabelle and Laurent, characters who pulled Daryl out of his lone wolf tendencies and gave him something to fight for beyond simple survival. The Ones Who Live, which premiered in 2024, finally answered the question fans had been asking since Rick's disappearance in Season 9. Where was Rick Grimes? The answer was complicated and heartbreaking, and ultimately hopeful. Rick had been taken by a powerful organisation called the CRM, and for years he tried to escape and return to his family. Michonne, who had never stopped looking for him, eventually found him. Their reunion was one of the most emotionally satisfying moments in the entire franchise, a payoff that fans waited 5 years to see, and the show gave them what the original series rarely allowed, a happy ending. Rick and Michonne found each other. They went home. These spin-offs are carrying forward the legacy of the original show, and they're doing it by continuing to explore the same themes that made The Walking Dead resonate in the first place. What are people capable of? What does it cost to survive? What do you owe the people you love? How much can one person lose before they stop being a person? The disturbing episodes we talked about tonight weren't the show at its worst. They were the show at its bravest. Every one of them was willing to go somewhere uncomfortable, to show something difficult, to sit with the consequences of violence and loss without flinching. The boiler room, the grove, the trough, the lineup, the pikes, the revolving door, the church where a boy shot himself so he wouldn't come back as something else. These aren't moments the show should apologise for. They're the moments that made the show what it was. Because here's the secret of The Walking Dead. It was never really about zombies. The walkers were the weather. They were the storm that was always there, always threatening, always pushing people to their limits. The real show was about the people inside the storm. The choices they made, the things they sacrificed, the love they held on to, even when holding on was the hardest thing in the world. Glenn's last words were, "Maggie, I'll find you." Not help, not stop, not please, I'll find you. Even in his last breath, beaten beyond recognition, with one eye hanging from its socket, the thing that mattered most to him was the person he loved. That's not a disturbing scene. That's one of the most beautiful things any character has ever said on television. It's just buried inside the most violent moment the show ever produced. and finding beauty inside the violence, finding hope inside the horror, finding reasons to keep living inside a world full of death. That was always the show's greatest achievement. Anyway, we've been here for a while. If you've made it this far, thank you, sincerely. I know tonight was heavy. We went through some of the darkest corners of a show that spent 11 years looking into the abyss and somehow never fell in. If any of that was too much, I get it. Take a breath, look at something nice. Maybe look at the flowers, as it were. And if you're ready to drift off, let me help with that. Tomorrow's a new day. No walkers, no Negan, no pikes. Just you and the sunrise and whatever good thing you decide to do with the hours you've been given. These characters fought so hard for the right to have one more day, and you've already got it. In a future video, I definitely want to cover more of this universe. The spin-offs have some incredible lore of their own. Dead City goes deep into the transformation of Manhattan and the terrifying new factions that have claimed different boroughs as their territory. Daryl Dixon introduces entirely new mythologies in France, including variant walkers that can run and climb and think in ways we've never seen before, plus a fascinating religious storyline about a boy who might hold the key to understanding the outbreak. And The Ones Who Live gives Rick Grimes the closure that fans waited years for, while also pulling back the curtain on the CRM, the most powerful and secretive organisation in the entire Walking Dead universe. One that might actually have the resources to rebuild civilization, but is willing to do terrible things to make it happen. There's also Tales of the Walking Dead, an anthology series that told standalone stories from different corners of the apocalypse, some funny, some tragic, all of them expanding the world in ways the main show never had time for. So there's plenty more to talk about whenever you're ready for another late night. But until next time, stay safe. Close your eyes. Let the world outside your window be quiet for a while. No matter what stories we tell about the end of the world, the real world is still here. You're still here. And that's worth something. The characters we talked about tonight, they fought for the chance to have one more ordinary morning, one more sunrise, one more day where the biggest decision is what to have for breakfast, not whether to run or fight. You've already got that. Don't forget how extraordinary ordinary is. And sweet dreams.